affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And a very good evening. Welcome to Farage here at 7 o'clock on GB News. Action-packed show, folks. And good news, yes, the Home Secretary, fresh from sorting out his 5-point plan about immigration yesterday. He's a busy man. He's down in Rwanda. Apparently, he's sorted it all out. Nothing to worry about at all. Bad news, though. Once again, bad news about the quality of our accommodation and housing for our armed forces. I'm appalled. We'll be digging into that big time. More bad news, I'm sorry to say, yes, the junior doctors. We thought it had been sorted, but no, they're coming out on strike, the longest ever strike. Unbelievable. And guess what? Apparently, on I'm a Celebrity, you might hear a bit of Nigel singing. All of that and much more, but first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Richard, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story tonight, a 28-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the stabbing of a 29-year-old woman in Aberfan in South Wales today. The pregnant woman was subjected to a knife attack on the street this morning. Chief Inspector Rob Miles from South Wales Police gave an update earlier.
The man is known to the victim and is currently in police custody. I appreciate there will be a real sense of shock within the local community with the attack having happened in broad daylight. Local schools activated their lockdown protocols to keep people safe. Neighbourhood officers have been in the area to ensure pupils have been able to leave the school safely at their normal time. This was done as a precaution, and schools will open tomorrow as normal. This was a targeted attack. The woman remains in hospital with injuries which are not believed to be life-threatening at this time.
The Home Secretary said today he's rather uncomfortable with some of the criticism about Rwanda as he unveiled a new asylum treaty. It's understood new British laws are to be expedited through Parliament, declaring Rwanda a safe country for the processing of asylum seekers arriving in the UK. James cleverly praised Rwanda for being part of the British solution, but the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, cast doubt on the plans.
This is now the third Home Secretary to go to Rwanda with a chequebook. They've sent more Home Secretaries than they have asylum seekers to Rwanda, and this scheme is badly failing. They still won't tell us how much it will cost, even though we've already know that we've spent £140 million or more on this scheme. And what they could be doing is putting that money into going after the criminal smuggler gangs and taking action there instead.
Junior doctors in England are set to stage the longest strike in NHS history after talks with the government on pay broke down. Ministers and representatives from the British Medical Association have been locked in negotiations for 5 weeks now, trying to find a solution. The BMA says the government has offered a pay increase, but it's only 3%, which they say amounts to a pay cut for some doctors. The first walkouts are due to start across England at 7 a.m. on the 20th of December. The High Court was told today that the impact of a successful attack, as they worded it, on the Duke of Sussex should have been considered when his security arrangements were changed in 2020. Prince Harry was stripped of special protections normally afforded to royals when he stepped back from his role and moved to the United States. His lawyers say a failure, though, to carry out a full risk analysis meant he was treated in an unlawful and unfair way when he was provided with a weaker kind of security whilst visiting the UK. Relatives of victims of the infected blood scandal have delivered a letter to Downing Street today. They're calling for action from the government after MPs voted last night in favour of speeding up compensation payments to victims. One of those, Richard Warwick, told GB News about his experience earlier on. We don't have that clip for you now. We'll play that for you later. In the meantime, let's just bring you some breaking news that's come to us in the last 10 minutes or so. We can confirm that Denny Laine of Wings and, of course, the Moody Blues has died at the age of 79. His wife said he died after a long battle with lung disease. Denny Laine working with a variety of artists and groups over a 6-decade career and continuing to record and perform as a solo artist. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Moody Blues. More on that later on.
And a very good evening. Welcome to Farage here on GB News. Now, most importantly of all, I've already voted 5 times on my app for I'm a Celebrity later this evening. We'll be having a QR code on the screen, I think, for most of the show. This is the important time when Nigel needs your votes because it's getting tense, it's getting difficult. And certain people, unbelievably, don't want him to win. More of that much later. But good news, the Home Secretary has been to Rwanda. You may know that he's the 3rd Home Secretary to go to Rwanda, but he says he's got it all sorted. He signed a new treaty with the government of Rwanda, and all will be fine. It'll be legally binding, and there'll be no problem with the Supreme Court. Let's just hear what he had to say this afternoon.
Well, the treaty itself, no additional money was asked for by the Rwandan government, none was given by the British government. Of course, when a country is taking on responsibilities, as Rwanda is doing, it is right and proper that there is remuneration to reflect the additional costs that they are bringing on.
How much will that be?
But that will depend, of course, on the timing, on the numbers, and we have committed to publish those figures on an annual basis, and we'll stick to that commitment. But I want to make it clear, this treaty was the Rwandan government did not ask for any additional money because of this treaty, and none was given as a result of this treaty.
Well, there we are. That's the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, the 3rd Home Secretary to go to Rwanda. So we've sent them 3 Home Secretaries, we've sent them 140 million quid and 0 migrants so far. But he's confident that all will be sorted and that this is now properly legally binding. There should be no more claims and the legislation can go through the House of Commons and the House of Lords with no ifs, no buts, no problem whatsoever. Who knows what time frame? He didn't commit to a time frame. And that's what slightly concerns me. So I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by 2 fantastic guests to dig into this. But my simple question to you at home, folks, is you've heard it all before. Do you trust them now? Will it work this time? And if so, how many migrants do you think will be sent to Rwanda before the general election sometime next year? Email me, farage@gbnews.com, or tweet #Farage on GB News, and we will get to your answers and your thoughts later. So I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Paul Turner, immigration lawyer, and also Dr. Joelle Grogan. I'm going to turn, Paul, to you first. Thanks for being with me again in the studio. We talked about this just a couple of weeks ago when the Supreme Court decision came out. I remember you saying to me, I asked you the question, were you surprised? And you simply said, no, not at all. So, look, the Home Secretary is now saying he's dealt with all the concerns, he thinks, of the Supreme Court. Apparently he hasn't offered them any more money. I can't actually believe they haven't asked for any more money, but that's their question. What do you think about this? You've heard it. Can this work?
Well, I think the starting point has to be, I wonder whether Mr Cleverly has actually read the Supreme Court decision. Because
Goodness me.
Well, the Supreme Court decision says that Rwanda is not safe on the ground, and that's due to the fact it doesn't have a functioning judicial system for dealing with asylum seekers. So simply there was the memorandum of understanding that said that all would be wonderfully well in Rwanda, and then looking at the evidence, the Supreme Court said, well, it's not, and there is a chance of people being sent to other countries where they're at risk. And having regard to the fact that the Rwandans, when they took people from Israel, quietly bussed them over the border to Uganda, that's a reasonable doubt.
But isn't that the key point of he's saying about the new treaty, is that they can't do that. They can't send any of these asylum seekers anywhere else except back to the UK. Is that right?
Well, that's what the treaty says. But the question is, and the factual question that has to be evaluated is, simply putting it in having a nice jolly over to Rwanda and a nice picture ceremony, signing a few documents, does that actually make Rwanda safe or not? Now, if the Rwandans don't change their system, don't implement an appeal system, and continue to ship people over the border at night when no one's looking, then it's not safe, no matter whatever they say. And Rwanda sadly doesn't have the best human rights record. I know the Home Secretary seems to think that they've been getting an awfully hard time. But perhaps if they didn't treat asylum seekers so badly, they wouldn't be.
But that's quite interesting because actually, I mean, there are UN reports that I've read that says that they made huge progress in Africa dealing with asylum seekers from other African nations. So it feels to me there's a bit of contradiction. But you've put the nub of it, the fact that the Supreme Court said that it wasn't a safe country, and your concern is that this new arrangement, this new treaty agreement between the UK and Rwanda doesn't appear to deal with that fundamental point from the Supreme Court.
Well, not unless the UK government goes over there and establishes a camp, such as the Italians have done, and polices the camp and puts workers in there to essentially process the applicants abroad subject to a reasonable standard, then there's going to be grave doubts that the Rwandans will say or do anything to get the £100,000 per asylum seeker that they've been promised, and so that they don't have to give back the 140 million quid.
And just finally, if this doesn't work, what's the alternative solution? Or actually, have they just got to abandon Rwanda, given that the Labour Party have said that they would abandon Rwanda if they won the next election?
Being blunt about it and looking at the news, by the time they get round to Rwanda number 4, they're not likely to be in power, are they?
There we are. Paul, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to turn to my next guest. Joelle Grogan, you are a European law expert. You're head of research at UK and a Changing Europe. What are your thoughts on this treaty? Do you agree with Paul Turner that, in a sense, it doesn't deal with the key concern of the Supreme Court?
There are 3 big questions I think every parliamentarian, everyone out there should be thinking about. The first question, exactly as we've just heard, is does it answer the Supreme Court? Supreme Court said, again, it's unsafe in Rwanda. I know there's been a lot of discussion of British lawyers being sent to Rwanda, but one myth we need to dispel is the fact that this is going to be asylum processing under Rwandan law. Mm-hmm. In fact, the official language of the Rwandan courts that the asylum seekers will be going through is not English. So maybe our British lawyers will need to learn some different languages. But the second big question that has to be answered is actually on that question that you've already raised, which is if asylum seekers are not given refugee status in Rwanda, they don't stay in Rwanda, do they come back to the UK? This creates a huge political and legal problem for the government.
I guess that's one they've thought of, but they're trying to deal with the concern of what they call the non-refoulement. And so what was the third point?
The third is cost, not only in the figures that we've already seen, but just in time and labour. One point that we should also emphasise from the Supreme Court judgment is it's a matter of law that the policy of sending someone to a third country is not unlawful. It's just, and this is something everyone agrees, the government, parliament, lawyers, international law, it has to be safe.
Has to be safe. And the Supreme Court said it wasn't safe. Just moving on to the point, let's assume that they get the legislation through the House of Commons and the House of Lords. To what extent do you think that will then prevent further legal claims from third parties on behalf of potential migrants being sent there or other groups? Will those be stopped, or actually are we going to see another massive round of legal action, possibly all the way up to the Supreme Court, that just frankly stops the whole thing again?
As a matter of law, and we will need to see what kind of legislation is then passed through the House of Commons and the Lords, it's going to be tough. No court in the world can overrule or strike down an act of Parliament. No court in the world. However, national law can't get rid of international obligations. So what's likely to happen if this legislation passes, if the government declares Rwanda is safe, we'll still see cases go to...
So you think there'll still be claims, but they're going to say, we've heard that they're going to put into the national legislation what they call notwithstanding clauses. So notwithstanding the international obligations that you've just touched on, the ECHR and the UN 51 Convention, notwithstanding that, it still stands. Isn't that enough? It's our court, it's our sovereignty?
Well, there's going to be a lot of issues of precedent there. If you start saying, notwithstanding our international obligations, notwithstanding the ECHR, notwithstanding our domestic law, notwithstanding our case law, we'll still say Rwanda is safe. I think the government will need to think about what kind of precedent it will set for the next government or their own government. But even beyond that, there will still be the question of committing this treaty, these international obligations to Rwanda and the UK, but also saying you're not going to follow other international obligations.
Yes, it sounds to me, neither of you sound terribly optimistic to me that this is actually going to fly and that anyone is going to, any migrants, asylum seekers are going to be sent to Rwanda before the next election, which is just a year away. You don't look very optimistic.
I know how parliamentary timetables work.
You know how it works. Any optimism from you, Paul? Or are you going to be not surprised again?
I'll be not surprised.
Not surprised again. There we have it, folks. You've heard it from the experts. I want to hear your view at home. Will it work? Will any asylum seekers be sent to Rwanda before the next election? Well, if you think that's bad enough, if you're in the military or you know anybody in the services, what's the quality of their accommodation, their housing like? We'll be talking about that straight after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's GB News.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends, to Farage on GB News. Well, I asked the big question, didn't I? Will the Home Secretary's new Rwanda treaty work? Do you think it'll work? And if so, how many migrants, asylum seekers, will be sent to Rwanda before the next general election due sometime next year? Well, Jackie says no, no, and none. That's pretty clear, Jackie. Thank you for that. We've got another one here. Anonymous one says, highly doubt the Home Secretary has the guts to carry this out, this Rwanda deal. It'll be quietly pushed back to after the general election and then completely scrapped if they're voted in again. Fascinating thought. Politicians kicking the can down the road? Surely not. Mike says, will the plan work? No. Will many migrants be sent before the next election? No. Millions wasted on a complete red herring. Well, that is pretty clear indeed. Now, I promised you a discussion about the state of our military housing and accommodation. We've heard this before. We're all concerned. It's truly unbelievable that we don't house and look after our serving armed forces properly. We know about the problems with the veterans. That's not good enough. But our current serving personnel? Let's just hear first of all what our political editor, Christopher Hope, said. He caught up with the Shadow Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard, a little bit earlier today.
It's utterly shambolic that after 13 years, we've got 1 in 3 of our armed forces personnel living in the lowest quality accommodation. What Labour have said is that we'll make it a priority to fix this. Frankly, if the government had made it a priority at any point in the last 13 years, this problem would already be fixed. So what we want to do is implement the recommendations of the independent review into armed forces accommodation to make sure that we're improving especially the lowest quality accommodation, because there's over 1,300 soldiers living in accommodation that is so bad the Ministry of Defence can't even charge rent on it, and that is shameful.
Well, there we are. There we are. Luke Pollard says it's shameful. And I have to say, looking at some of the numbers here, it really is extraordinary. But a man who really understands this is, of course, Mark Francois, MP, the Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, and a former Minister of State for Defence Personnel, Welfare and Veterans. Mark, very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Farage. Look, this is serious. It's been going on and on and on. And I think the country is just aghast that this can't be sorted. Millions, hundreds of millions, billions being poured into this. What's going on, Mark? Why is this taking so long? Why can't we sort it?
Well, Richard, thank you for kindly mentioning I'm a former MOD minister. I produced a report for the then Prime Minister in February 2020, which was called Stick or Twist. You know, do personnel stay in the armed forces or leave? Do they stick or twist? And accommodation was one of the major factors that affect that decision. The report's on my parliamentary website. It's publicly available. The gist of my conclusion was we've got to spend a bit less money on shiny kit and a bit more money on looking after our personnel, including their accommodation, because if you don't, a lot of those experienced people will leave, and then you've got no one to operate the shiny kit that you spent a fortune on in the first place. And at the moment, we're now in a bad situation where we've got more people leaving the armed forces than joining, so we must do something about this.
Well, we've got the latest information from official inspectors is 25,000 serving personnel are living in deficient accommodation out of some 80,000, despite the fact that huge contracts have been awarded to private sector companies up and down the country to get on top of this and to sort it out. I mean, the first outsourced contracts was about 9 years ago, and the government time and again says they're getting on top of it. But we've still got lots of people forced to live in homes with broken boilers, black mould, roofs, endless wait for repairs. It's going from bad to worse, Mark.
The service personnel accommodation is overseen by something called the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, the DIO. Service personnel nickname it the DI-No because when they want help, it often says no. You're quite right, they've outsourced the accommodation contract. It's a thing called FDIS. It went live several months ago. It's been an unmitigated disaster. The contract doesn't work. I serve on the House of Commons Defence Committee. We're now in the middle of a detailed inquiry into...
I think we've just lost you there, Mark. This is, I mean, it's just scandalous, folks. You can't believe it. Huge contracts awarded to private sector companies. We're promised time and again it will be sorted, and once again, it's not. I think we may have Mark back. No, we've lost Mark Francois, but Mark, thank you so much for your thoughts there. It's just not good enough. How on earth can we get to this situation that billions of pounds are being supposedly spent on upgrading the accommodation for our military serving personnel, and once again, doesn't seem to happen? It's just not good enough. Well, moving on, other breaking news today, other important news, and I think sad news is that the BMA have confirmed that there will be more strikes, more junior doctors' strikes, this time in the run-up to Christmas and in the first few days of the new year, including, I think, their longest ever doctors' strike. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Arjun Singh, who is part of the Junior Doctors Committee at the British Medical Association. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us. Thank you. This is very unwelcome news, frankly, to the whole nation at any time of the year, but in particular in the run-up to Christmas. I mean, surely this is not going to gain you any friends, is it? Much sympathy by doing it just before Christmas, is it?
I agree that the news is not welcome. No one wants to go on strike, especially doctors, especially during this period of time. But we've been in negotiations with the government for a while now, and whilst the relationship has definitely improved since our time with Steve Hartley, which was an unmitigated disaster, we still haven't moved quite enough. And unfortunately, it has been proven time and time again that strike action is the only way to put and poke this government into action. Now, I will say, if the government can give us a credible offer now, tomorrow, the day after, even on the day of the strike, we'll call them off. It is in the government's power. Unfortunately, we are just too far apart at the moment.
I mean, you say it's the only action, but in the private sector, Doctor, actually negotiations take place. Very few people in the private sector go on strike. You've had an offer of 8.8%, as I understand, plus another 3%. Most people in the private sector are not getting these sort of offers. They don't get the sort of generous pensions. I'm sort of thinking, are you being a bit greedy here? We all want doctors to be well motivated and incentivised, but I'm coming back to this point about I'm not sure you're bringing the public with you.
I don't think we're being greedy at all. Our ask is pay restoration, and percentages can be misleading when you're talking about very small numbers. But we're asking for a doctor in the first year to get paid £20 an hour. And it's interesting that you bring up the private sector, but according to the Financial Times, and using their own index to work out pay cuts, we've had a pay cut more than 10 times higher than the average private sector worker over the last 14 years. Our pay cut has been horrific, and we're just asking for it to be restored, and that's £20 an hour for a doctor with huge student debt. And unfortunately, if we don't pay doctors, they are going to leave. We work in a global market, and there is a shortage everywhere.
I think, and I'm very sympathetic to the concern about student loans, student debt, which I think is another huge scandal, something that I've talked about elsewhere. Is there any form of what I would call performance-related pay within this package at all, or is that not possible, or just completely unwelcome and off the table?
There's been no talks of performance-related pay. I think you have to understand we don't have enough doctors. We're seeing 500 British people die every single week in the NHS because there aren't enough doctors. That is a national scandal. Our National Health Service is an abomination, and the care that people get in this country, they've worked their whole lives to get, is truly horrific. And it's because there's not enough of us, because we can't retain doctors because of the pay.
But I'm wondering, actually, if there's not enough doctors and you can't retain them, I'm thinking, well, maybe some form of performance-related pay may help. I'm obviously not here to sort of negotiate, but I'm just interested because that's quite common in the private sector. Doctor, thank you so much indeed. I think, you know, it's desperate news for the nation in the run-up to Christmas at a difficult time anyway. We will obviously keep abreast of this situation. Dr. Arjun Singh, thank you so much indeed for being with us here on GB News. Well, there we are. Bad news, I'm afraid, is coming thick and fast. But some good news. Yes, he's still in the jungle so far. He needs your help. He needs your votes. We'll be talking about that straight after the break.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akweer, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage. Now, those of you who watch Nigel regularly or might have been to some of his Farage at Large events, and I know him pretty well, I think one of the last words you would describe him as is boring or sending you to sleep. So I have to say, I was quite surprised by the front page of today's Daily Mirror. Just take a look at this. Farage makes you kip. The Daily Mirror thinks that Nigel Farage is boring and sends you to sleep. What do you think about that? I have to say, I think that's pretty extraordinary. So I did a little bit of digging, a bit of research. I thought, well, how exciting do people find the Daily Mirror? So I thought, well, how's the readership numbers looking over the last 10, 15, 20 years? This is quite interesting. So 20 years ago, in 2000, 2.3 million read the Daily Mirror. 2005, 1.7, 2010, 1.25, 2020, 450,000. This graph takes us down to now 248,000 people. So a fall in the last 20 years of 90%. So I'm going to suggest to you that maybe the readers of the Daily Mirror find actually that paper, the Daily Mirror, is boring and that they've gone elsewhere. Anyway, we're going to go elsewhere. We're heading down to the Gold Coast. We're heading down to Australia because our GB News reporter, Adam Cherry, is, of course, enjoying a holiday. He's occasionally dialing in just to tell us what's going on. Adam, so what's going on? We didn't see much of Nigel last night, did we? But I hear there's some exciting news about an extraordinary discussion or something.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Richard. Yes, dare to dream that the dawn is breaking here on the Gold Coast of a post-Nella free I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here jungle. She's out, she's gone, it's over. Interesting discussions. Yes, there was a really interesting discussion in the last couple of days from Nigel, which I'm told was completely cut from the show, and that was about the NHS. So as you've just said, the Daily Mirror, we're seeing negative briefings from them yet again. Nigel's boring. Nigel only talks about politics. We've already discussed on this show how they cut the discussion, Nigel's discussion about Donald Trump. Now they've done it again with the NHS. Now, just to return to Nella for a second, because she mentioned Nigel in her exit interview. The public had their say and she's finally left. So let's take a look at what she had to say about Nigel and the reasons why she got into so many dramatic scrapes during her time in the jungle. Take a look at this.
Yeah, for me, I think Nigel's an amazing person until he speaks about what he really believes in, and it's like, oh no, but you're a cool guy, but why do you think like that? Like, just, do you know what I mean? It's a sticky one. It's a really sticky one, that one, I can't lie.
But what you said in that...
So she's gone, Adam. Well, I have to say...
There you have it. Well, she's finally...
Many people might be quite delighted about that, but what's the suggestion that there might be some singing going on? Is that something to look forward to this evening?
Some singing to go along.
Singing?
You'll have to tune in tonight to see that, Richard. We're just a couple of hours away from that. Alongside that, we've also got the next elimination. So we had Marvin in the bottom two last night. Definitely keep an eye on him to see if he clings on for another day. Just to remind you again, you can vote for Nigel via the QR code, which we're showing on screen frequently throughout the programme. And we've got the Vote Remain campaign in full swing here on the Gold Coast as well. So stick around in the next couple of hours to find out if Nigel is staying in the jungle for another day.
Adam, fantastic. Thank you so much indeed. You look as though you're having a really terrible time, but do try and enjoy it if you can. That's Adam Cherry down on the Gold Coast, keeping us updated. Now, it's always good to know, from the experts, people who've been there, done that. And, of course, an I'm a Celebrity winner in 2018, none other than the former guru Premier League football manager, one Harry Redknapp, is with me down the line. Harry, a very good evening. Thanks for being with us. You must be missing it. You must be jealous of Nigel down there.
No, I'm much happier sitting at home, really, having a nice bit of dinner tonight and a glass of wine, rather than being stuck in that jungle and eating all that crazy food. Yeah, no, I wouldn't swap places with him, to be honest.
That's fascinating. So tell us about it. How nervous is it now, sort of the last few days, people are being eliminated? Were you nervous at this point, or frankly, did you just want to literally get out of there, but were just sort of voted through to the end?
I think you just get on with it. I honestly think when you go in there, you don't really want to be the first one voted out, if I'm truthful. You think, well, you know, if you go out second or third or fourth, I think you'll be quite happy. You've done your bit, enjoyed it. But Nigel's hung in there. I think he's doing okay. I don't know. I think he'll be in there for quite a while. Yeah, I don't see him getting voted out at the moment. I think he's doing quite well.
And what do you think to the suggestion, Harry, that some of his discussions are being deliberately cut, even though they might be quite interesting, whether it's talking about former President Trump or the NHS? I mean, these are some of the things people want to hear Nigel's thoughts on, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's true. I read somewhere today in the paper that Nigel, when Frankie got voted out, Nigel said to him, it's a fix. I mean, I bet that didn't go down too well. Sure. I don't know if I read it in the paper, whether he said it or not. I missed that. I didn't hear that, you know, at the time.
I guess
they obviously cut out. They show what they want to show, basically.
Absolutely.
They can show you really any light they want to show you because, yeah, there's so much film. They're filming 24 hours a day, so they'll show what they want to show.
And that's one of his concerns about not getting enough airtime, and maybe that was the reason Frankie got voted out. So if he could hear you now, what would be your advice, Harry, to him in order to win? Because Nigel's very competitive. He does like to win.
I think all you can do is be yourself. I think if you go in there, I'd never seen the programme, so I didn't have a clue what it was about. I honestly thought it was a survival programme where you went in there and you were sort of given a spear or something, and you had a survivor who could survive in the jungle the longest. I'd never watched it, but I would just say to Nigel, but be yourself. If you go in there with a plan to win it, this is what you've got to do. We've got to dance around and, you know, I think you'll fall flat on your face. People who vote, they'll vote for your personality, and those that like him will vote for him. Those that don't like him will want him out.
Yeah, that's right. Is there anything else he should be doing? I mean, in order to get more airtime or to get voted onto a trial? It's a critical moment. These next couple of days, we're all a bit nervous. I have to tell you, here in the studio.
Probably keep dropping his trout, having a shower, but there's no clothes on. I mean, that's got a bit of publicity. It wasn't. Let's be honest. It wasn't exactly a pretty sight, but maybe that's what he needs to do. Get a bit more publicity.
And so, are you backing Nigel? I mean, you know, you might be a betting man occasionally, Harry. Have you had a few quid? I was told he was 10 to 1.
I'm Tony Bellew. I like Tony. I like him a lot as a guy. I think he's a great. He's just in there. He's just being himself. And who else do I like? Sandra's give me a bit of advice here. Bristol. Oh, the girl from Bristol.
The girl from Bristol. I can't remember which one that is, but Josie Gibson. Josie, yeah, she's one of the hot favourites.
I like Josie. Yeah, she's good. They're all okay. They're all doing their stuff in there. But yeah, I like Tony Ben. I do Tony Bellew. I think
Tony Bellew.
He's a good lad, good character.
He seems a good egg, absolutely. When you were there, Harry, I mean, obviously you get very hungry, so I guess everybody loses a bit of weight. I thought Nigel was looking quite trim, possibly a touch irritable at times.
It might do him good, actually. He could come out there losing 12, 15, 16 pounds or whatever, lose a stone. Yeah, quite easily. I mean, I didn't eat much, though, when I was in there. The food was so shocking. But, yeah, and there's a bit of arguing about who does the cooking. Fred seems to have the needle, that he's not allowed to do the cooking.
Absolutely.
But, whoever cooks it, the food's still rubbish. It doesn't matter how you box it up. It's just absolute awful.
Absolutely. So, in terms of, obviously, Nigel's a pretty high profile going in. How do you think this helps or hinders Nigel as he comes out of the jungle, whether he wins or not, in terms of sort of the next stages? It's because there's been a lot of coverage.
Yeah, I think he's done himself no harm. I think people see him as he is. Even Matt Hancock came out there more popular than what he went in, didn't he? I mean, I think after the show...
Probably wasn't difficult.
It wasn't difficult. But unfortunately, since he's come out again, unfortunately, he's fallen flat on his face again. So, but at the moment, I think Nigel's doing okay. And
all right.
Yeah,
so you're not backing Nigel to win?
He hasn't done himself any harm. He's earned a few quid, keep him going for a few years, and I'm sure he's quite happy.
Well, you're not backing him to win. Are you backing my football finally, Harry? My football team, Liverpool.
I'm not going to have. No, I'm not betting. I've not had a bet on it, but he wouldn't carry my money if I did have a bet.
He wouldn't carry money. What about my football team finally, Harry? Liverpool. Are they going to win the league for a change?
Three runners, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal. I think Liverpool will be bang there this year. I think it's going to be a really tight league, I think, between the three of them. And then Spurs, Newcastle are doing well, but I think Liverpool have got a real chance this year.
Excellent. I am delighted to hear that. Harry Redknapp, thank you so much indeed for being with us. Great to see you as always. That's the great Harry Redknapp. He won it. He knows all about the tension, the hunger, the boredom. I've never known Nigel bored, but there we are. Anyway, coming up, we've got a QR code, I think, just to look at, just to remind you about the voting, because there it is. Make Nigel king of the jungle. Download the app. You've got 5 votes on the app. I've already voted. This is the 10th time. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about things motoring. I mean, how hard is it to drive at 20 miles an hour? Frankly, I think it's a nightmare. We'll be talking about that and more to come after the break.
Earlier with Eamon and Isabel.
Disturbing revelations revealing the rise of dangerous ex-prisoners changing their names when applying for work and benefits. Charlie Peters has an exclusive report for us today.
This child rapist decided that they wanted to become a woman. They could have changed their name and it would not have matched the name for their restrictions.
The Prime Minister has suffered his first defeat in the House of Commons over the infected blood scandal.
It's dreadful living with, the 3 viruses. Luckily, I did manage to clear Hep C in 2015, but I mean, it's just affected every part of my life.
You are the Pied Piper of climate change denial. That's exactly what's going on. You've got people following you who are clueless as to what's going on.
Jim, I've literally just said the climate's always changed and always will. No, the deniers are those who think you can stop it.
The prime reason why is fossil fuels.
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
Monday to Thursday
from 6 a.m.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends, to Farage here on GB News. Well, what the Farage is going on? You might be pleased. It's good news that we are sending violent criminals, Albanian criminals, back to Albania. But goodness me, they go not only with money to the Albanian government, but also in pursuit of the joys and the delights of net zero obligations and ambitions. Yes, we're sending them. I can't believe this, actually. Seriously, we're sending Albania a fleet of electric vehicles worth over £1.5 million, 15 electric cars, 22 minibuses. Really? Electric minibuses to help the Albanian prison service. Absolutely extraordinary. Is that a good use of taxpayers' cash? Meanwhile, the Gringes and the Grunges and the Scrooges who run Lincoln City Council, they've cancelled the Christmas market. This is incredible. Not because no one wanted it. No. Because it was too popular. Yes, over 300,000 people enjoyed it last year. So why would you want to have another one if it's too popular? No, much better to scratch it and earn the Scrooge of the Year award. That's my second What the Farage moment. Quite extraordinary. Now, matters motoring continuing. I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew R.T. Davis, who, of course, is the leader of the Welsh Conservatives and the member of the Conservative group in the Senedd. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. Matters motoring indeed. The 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which I have to say is always hard to sort of to comply with. It's pretty slow. Pretty upsetting when you see a cyclist going past you, frankly. But what's the status of that in Wales and the petition that I think has got almost 500,000 people signed it? Is that going to make any progress or not?
Well, as you said there, Richard, and good evening, first of all, that the petition that was made on the second petition is nearly 500,000 signatures from now, and that's from a population of 3 million people. So there is massive Welsh Labour government's initiative. We know that Keir Starmer has, what he'd like to do if he became Prime Minister in Westminster, look to Wales. The evidence that the Welsh Labour government has put forward about this initiative, which is the blanket nature of the 20 mph across the whole of Wales on formerly 30-mile-an-hour restricted roads, has having a devastating impact on the economies of many communities. No one argues against the proposition that there should be 20 mph around sensitive sites, such as hospitals, schools and care homes. But what people dispute is obviously the blanket nature that the Welsh Labour government and how it's costing jobs, costing livelihoods, impinging on people's ability to go about their everyday lives.
Yeah, we're just losing your signal a little bit there, Andrew. I'm even hearing of pharmacies with deliveries to customers. They can't make the deliveries fast enough. They're sort of reduced from 30 a day down to 20 a day. So it's having a serious negative health impact apart from anything else.
Well, pharmacies is one very good example of how this is impacting on the ability to get medicines out to those who are housebound, but also retain fire now because of the speed restriction. Can't be living in the catchment of the fire station that obviously they serve, and it potentially could mean that they would have to give up being retained firemen and women because they couldn't get to the station in time when the alarm goes up. So every aspect of this policy is bonkers, and when we look at the evidence from across the rest of the UK and indeed across Europe, it does not have the life-saving impacts that the Welsh Labour government has said it would have. And on Spanish roads, in fact, we've seen more accidents happen because of the displacement of traffic from roads that are affected by the 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction.
Andrew, I was even hearing about, actually, in one very steep hill, lorries could barely get up the hill and try and stay within the speed limit. We're just losing the signal a little bit. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us and sharing that. We will keep a close eye on that. I think in many cases it's a terrible, terrible policy. Anyway, I'm delighted now to be joined in the studio by one Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Matters motoring, Jacob. There's an important private members bill coming in tomorrow or Wednesday. I always thought they were on Fridays, but there's obviously a good reason why it's tomorrow. Introduced by Gareth Johnson, the Dartford MP, to try and stop the London ULEZ scheme. Any chance of going through, or will it be time voted out?
I'm afraid not. It's a 10-minute rule bill, and 10-minute rule bills are essentially making the point. They very, very rarely get through to law. The private members' bills that comes through on Fridays have the best chance of becoming law.
But the government could adopt it. I mean, as I understand, the government does actually have the ability under Section 143 of the GLA 99 Act to actually say that the ULEZ policy is inconsistent with national policy and to overrule it, but they've decided not to.
Well, unfortunately, it isn't. That's the problem. ULEZ comes from actions that the government has taken. There would be no ULEZ if the government legislated to stop it, or if it weren't telling other councils that it ought to do it. ULEZ could be stopped by a Conservative government, and I think this would be a marvellous thing to do. I think we ought to do it. We created the powers that allowed some ULEZs to be done. I think the London one already existed, but the rest of the country was given those powers a few years ago, and I think we should reverse this. I think it's absolute madness, all this ULEZ stuff.
And fascinating, there's a new political party set up in Oxford, the Independent Oxford Alliance, that's campaigning on a single issue of stopping LTNs. What a great idea.
Well, I would always encourage people to support the Conservative Party, but this is fascinating.
One example, maybe.
This is absolutely fascinating that people are just fed up with this war on the motorist.
Absolutely.
And what I don't understand is why the main political parties haven't worked this out, because surely we want to win votes.
Maybe you're going to talk about that on your show. What's coming?
Well, I'm not particularly talking about cars today, though I do quite often. I'm talking about Keir Starmer seeming to become a Tory. It's absolutely amazing. We had this stuff
supporting
about...
Mrs. Thatcher, Lady
Thatcher. That's right. He's more Tory than you nowadays. I mean, you're being outflanked on the right.
What's going on here?
What's happening? And there's been all this gossip about will Nigel Farage come back to the Tory party, and Rishi Sunak saying he'd be very welcome.
All of a sudden, you're now tempting Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, suddenly Keir Starmer is adopting Tory policies. He's not going to turn the spending taps on. He's becoming less green. He admires Margaret Thatcher. I mean, it's making us look like
He's trying to steal your
pinkos.
votes.
Yes, well, you're trying to do that as well. Everyone's trying to do it.
Have a great show, Jacob. Everyone's trying to take his votes. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow night. Enjoy Jacob's show. Coming up, of course, it's the all-important weather at a time of cold.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It'll be a colder night tonight than last night because much of the country will be under clear spells. That's because the rain many of us have seen through today, brought by this low pressure, is pushing off to the east, and behind it we've got a bit more of a settled interlude, at least that will last at least through Wednesday. So plenty of clear spells out there this evening, and a frost developing quite quickly, so temperatures will drop off quite quickly tonight. There's an ice warning in force across eastern areas of Scotland. We'll see some mist and fog developing across parts of Wales and the southwest of England, and it will be widely a frosty start to the day tomorrow. But there will be some sunshine around, particularly across northern areas and eastern areas where the sunshine should last for much of the day. Further west, though, the sunshine will turn hazier throughout the day once any mist and fog clears, and you can see across parts of Northern Ireland there will be rain arriving by lunchtime. That rain will push into parts of Wales as well as Cornwall by the end of the day as well. Temperatures will start to rise, though, in the west with more of a southwesterly breeze. In the east, however, still feeling quite chilly with only highs of around 3 or 4 degrees. And then Thursday is going to be a widely more wet day. There are warnings in force for heavy rain across many western areas as well as parts of Scotland too. There could be some difficult driving conditions because of the rain, and the rain will last through the rest of the week, Friday and into the weekend, but temperatures will start to rise into double figures. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.